I think the probability of regime change is somewhere around 30%, which means the base case is this thing's going to be a protracted experience. In terms of thinking about what this means in terms of the risk is, let's go back to the Iranian asymmetric doctrine. It means proxies. In this focus on disruptions in the Hormuz Strait, I think, are misplaced. Yes, we're going to lose supplies there. I'm not going to say that's not going to happen. It could be 100 million barrels plus, which is the supply size of that oil supply gut at sea, which, we've been dismissing for the last 18 months. But I think the real risk is we're going to see proxies in other places. You have, I think, the Abraham Lincoln sitting in the Gulf, the Ford is in the Eastern Med, and the Houthis are in the Red Sea, but nobody's guarding places like Mozambique LNG or other choke points around the world. And I think Iraq is another one you got to watch really carefully, and that's the second biggest member of OPEC. So I think, the risk here this is a protracted environment, and that, the risks are to the upside. One last point here is we've been talking about a security premium in energy prices now for over a year. I think this is it. This is going to be a structural repricing, and I would not fade this current spike.
But Jeff, so just so I fully understand, this would be basically Iran and proxies going after energy infrastructure to almost on purposely put the price of oil up so that Trump backs down.
I'm not going to go. That could be part of it. I think there's a bigger point here, is that the risk of your supply chains right now have never been higher. And if you're China, you're India, you're going to start to hoard oil. And not only oil, but all commodities. I think I was on here 2 or 3 months ago, banging the drum on hoarding. The hoarding situation is going to become more extreme. So that increases the demand for oil. At the same time, you look at supply. Yes, OPEC announced a 200,000 barrel per day increase, but you look at past compliance, that's 80 to 90,000 barrels per day. Less than half, because we're capacity constrained outside of Saudi Arabia and UAE.
But what do you think is needed for the Strait of Hormuz to normalize? And actually, you don't think that will really normalize
I
over
think
the medium term?
You look at why we think you could get disruption in this, I'm going to say this first kinetic storm, is because it's like a hurricane. You're shutting down the rigs, you're evacuating crews, the ships are being moored just like it were a hurricane. That's going to last for probably 7 to 10 days. Once we pass that, this current kinetic storm will probably subside, but the overall situation, we don't know where it's going to hit next. I guess it goes back to this whole idea of Iran's, asymmetric doctrine. It could be anywhere.
So how much do you think will be lost? I mean, is it impossible to quantify how much supply could be lost?
Okay, let's just go through the math. Let's say there's 20 million barrels per day that go through the straits. You have pipelines through Saudi Arabia and through the UAE that could take out another 6.5 million barrels per day. You have inventories and things of that nature. So let's put it at, let's say, 8 to 10 million barrels per day. Do that for 7 to 10 days, you get 100 million barrels per day plus. Let's say that's the same size as that floating glut that was sitting in like the South China Sea. So it's kind of a wash. But then what happens after that? That's the point here. Yeah, I would be careful fading it because it starts to become much more serious. One last point is, let's not forget, the reason why people were not reading that oil supply glut correctly is because we have 2 supply chains in the world, U.S. block and China block. You need more inventory for a bigger supply chain. And what ships are getting through the straits right now? Russian, Chinese, and Iranian. So the China block is still flowing oil through the straits.